welcome to the Curiosity and Connection podcast. I'm your host, Na, and today's guest is Rachel. Rachel and I just met like 2 months ago, but I think we were kindred spirit because her Corgi's name is Pippin, and I was like, Pippin from Lord of the Rings, and she affirmed it. I was like, oh, my fellow kindred spirit. I don't generally meet a lot of women who read Lord of the Rings, right? Especially in geek culture. It's male driven, you know? Unless if they're dating someone, then the partner is the geek. And maybe they kind of immerse themselves in that world, but to kind of meet someone who's individually like interested in Tolkien, right? That was just something rare. When the first movie came out with Peter Jackson, in between movie, I decided to read the book just to get ahead of it. And I fell in love with the world of The Hobbit. Let's dive into today's curiosity, mostly surrounding, from a female lens, the geek world, whether it's fantasy, sci-fi, gaming. But let's start with Tolkien because that's how we connected.
Yeah.
Help me understand, how did you fall into that world?
I think a lot of it is probably attributed to my father and then also just kind of being in the right place at the right time. So I was born in 1992, so I was about 9 when Fellowship of the Rings came out, and I already knew that I loved the fantasy genre. My parents couldn't give me timeouts because they'd put me in my room and I would just go read books. So they couldn't effectively punish me that way. But my dad had always really liked Tolkien, and so when those movies came out, I think they came out on Boxing Day.
Yeah.
We would do the Christmas thing, and then the next morning, we would all get in the van, and we went to go see Fellowship of the Ring.
Yeah.
And that was the first time I think I'd seen a fantasy movie on such a grand scale and live action. Because, there's lots of sci-fi cartoons and, like, my mom used to watch old Star Trek reruns. Yeah, but those were very clearly, like, made with a television budget, a little limited,
Yes.
and this was so expansive and cared for.
And we'll adapt it to.
Absolutely, and I was just captivated by it, and it was pretty formative from there, I think. I was a little young at the time to try and read the books, but I did get through The Hobbit.
Leading up to the first movie, you said you were 9, and you said your dad was always a Tolkien fan, I gather?
Yeah.
And he had talked about, like, the Tolkien world and you kinda picked up on it?
A little bit. I would say it more so came up when the movies were starting to come out. We'd always been a bit of a, like, sci-fi, fantasy leaning family, like, one of the first box set movies that on the old, like, the VHS sets that my parents got us were, Star Wars 4 through 6, or they let us watch The Matrix, which was wildly violent for a 7-year-old to watch. And my parents were pretty good about it. They had us in karate for self-defense at a pretty young age, and we learned pretty quickly, like, it actually really hurts when you punch someone. I guess we were able to watch, like, the fight scenes and just be like, "Oh, that would be really painful. This is a movie. Maybe we shouldn't do that." We've been watching those Dexter movies for a really long time, and then when, they announced that the trilogy was gonna come out as movies, my dad just got really excited. He started telling us all about it, and I don't think we were super convinced, but we were as soon as we watched the movie.
Like you said, just watching it on that grand scale and your grasp of, your exposure to sci-fi prior to, but to see all the elements come together without reading the book. Secondhand, the same information from your dad, it's different versus like watching it and just, do you know what I mean? Like taking that all in.
It was so incredibly immersive, and I think one of the things that I love about the story itself is that it's just as much about the people in the story as it is about the story itself.
Yes.
I really like that. I like that the world was, like, inaccessible because it's Middle Earth, it's fantasy. You can't really understand what it's like to be there, but you can understand what it is to have those kind of relationships with people and care about other people and, like, build those bonds. And to have them portrayed in what I feel is like a really healthy way, with the exception of like obviously if your relationship.
Yeah, well, that were some of your standout moments that resonated with you aside from like, wow, this is really stunning and immersive?
Hmm.
Let's go back to you said there was healthy depiction of healthy relationship. Like, which characters did you find that embodied?
Well, Mary and Pippin, I think they're cousins, but they're also best friends.
Yeah.
But I really liked how they were able to tease each other, but they also weren't shy about sharing how much they cared about each other. And I think that probably comes out more in the second and third movies when they're put at risk as opposed to kind of just joshing around.
Yeah.
But that was always really nice. The classic Sam and Frodo, but Sam saying like, I might not be able to carry the ring, but I can carry you. And I think Sam's whole kind of journey, and especially in the third movie of, and I think it applies to like relationships today. Like Frodo was going through something incredibly difficult,
Yeah.
and he wasn't acting like himself. I I think that's a bit of an understatement. And Sam knew that and had a level of understanding and patience and care. And he still, well, he left, but then he came back.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important because like you can apply that to today. Like there are lots of people that are going through struggle, like loud or quiet, and they might not be treating people the way that they would want to. And sometimes just with a little patience or even just like taking a little bit of extra time to look at the situation, you can see a little bit more what's happening and have some compassion for that.
Yeah, definitely. Having watched the movie and reading the book after the fact, how did you feel? Because what I struggle was, I think when I watched the movie and then I read the book and then the second and third movie came out, I had this habit where I'm like, that didn't happen in the book, or that didn't happen, or and it wasn't until the DVD came out with the commentary where Peter Jackson saying, "Yeah, I know people are saying that this wasn't said by this character, but the reality of interpreting what is written versus how you convey it through screen and
Yeah.
the time crunch, we had to give that line to someone else, or we couldn't cover everything because the main point is, did it add to the art, but did it add to the outlook of
Yeah.
where they wanted to go with it, right? Well, the side story, as curious as it is, by the fan on the screen, that would just go over like 6 hours or whatever, right? For one movie. So when he explained from that lens, I was like, okay, I get it. Did you have your own experience with comparing the book, a conception versus the adaptation?
Yeah, I think I treat the adaptation very generously just because I don't think they could have really done a better job unless, as you said, it was a 6-hour movie. My opinion on it is also kind of colored by other fantasy adaptations.
What do you mean? And does it make sense?
So, like, where I find the absolute bottom bar for a fantasy adaptation is the Aragon movie. Like, Eragon, like, by Christopher Paolini. It's the Inheritance series. I don't know how fun it would be for you to read now because he wrote them when he was 14,
Okay.
and then I think he finished them when he was around 21. So it's a little more difficult to read when you're an adult because
Yeah.
it reads like that.
Yeah.
But I loved those books when I was, like, in my early teens, and they adapted it. God, I think it was in high school, like, in the early.
In the Errands series?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they decided that instead of her growing up naturally like any, like, creature would, they just had a montage where she changed from a baby into an adult. That was extremely odd, and then I can't remember what change they made, but they changed something in the first movie that was so fundamentally wrong that it erased, like, major plot points from the future books. Even if the movie had been successful enough to get a sequel, they wouldn't have been able to do it without rewriting basically the entire plot.
This was like before.
This was after. I'm all kind of colored by hindsight.
Yeah, that's fast. No, but it's good because I think that's one of the things when you're watching something, it really meets you where you're at that moment in your life. Obviously, when you go back and watch it, you're picking up different perspective. You were saying in hindsight, just like
Yeah.
all the vital things that made the book so lovable,
Mhm.
they just kind of butchered it. And even if they were to do future projects, it wasn't gonna. Yeah, accordingly.
Yeah.
Not so Aragorn was, like, in hindsight, your lowest benchmark
Yeah.
of him.
But yeah. And so that was really disappointing for me. And then somewhere in the middle, I put Harry Potter
Mhm.
because I was also extremely into Harry Potter. And those were getting adapted around the same time as Lord of the Rings.
Yes.
And those ones I had read at the time of
Mm.
watching. So I was able to make judgments on those. And that was when I kind of learned, like, yeah, they took away the potion scene from
Mm.
the Philosopher's Stone. But Hermione already had a trial,
Mm.
and it made a lot of sense
Yes.
to add that in. I was already kind of starting to think about that.
Yeah, from that lens, yeah.
And most of the changes I think they made, especially in the early movie, were pretty justified and they made sense. We put Lord of the Rings at like
The top 2?
yeah, at the top just because I think like it has a narrative that it wants to tell you and it tells it to you extremely effectively. And just knowing how Tolkien can be in his prose,
There's so many side tangents.
it's very dense.
Very side tangent, and but the fact that also, for its time, the fact that Peter Jackson built with Weta Studio,
Yeah.
a mass program to just, like, capture, convey what he wanted. It was just
Yeah.
so surreal, right?
Yeah, the scale of it, building those sets or even
All the costumes.
yeah.
And the family even, like, stuck true to it, like, when he pitched to his studios and they were like, "No, crunch it down to 1 movie." He was like, "No," he stood his ground, which we do appreciate because, you know, what's your take on this? I wasn't a big fan of the Hobbit movie, nor was it even though it's done in 3-part or 2-part,
3
uh,
parts, which was a decision.
this
There's something to be said for a director that has a lot of care
yeah,
for the source material
yes.
and is extremely faithful to it because the reason that you get funding to, like, make these movies or, like, TV shows or whatever is because there's a built-in fan base of people who are deeply invested in the source material, and I think it takes a person with an extreme attention to detail, but also that personal care towards the source material as well to actually just kind of surrender your ego and not insert too much of your own opinion into something that's already very well loved.
Yes.
Like, I think, like, it happened with Game of Thrones.
Yes. Later, after
Yeah, and as soon as the books ran out, like, at least my general understanding, I'm not in the Hollywood rooms, was that
6 to 8 was really fast track. Yeah.
yeah, they had a general understanding of where it was supposed
Yeah.
to go.
We'll fit them, like, what the final outcome was.
Yeah, and they had the green light to do more seasons or longer seasons, and they opted not to because they felt that they could tell the story in their own way. And obviously, that ended up in one of the most disappointing final seasons of all time.
The Prino Ultimate or whatever the Sonology of it just kinda so
Yeah,
robbed.
and it felt like there was a disregard for the story that had been told in the first 4 or 5 seasons.
But I think in their case, it was a bit challenging too because you think of Lord of the Ring or even Aragon, like, the source material is already from start to finish where
Yeah.
they were struggling with, like, yes, there's tangible 5 books,
Mhm.
then there's the intended. Yeah, the intended is very open to interpretation even though he has, like, mapped out, like, where he wanted to go,
Yeah.
and it's hard to kind of ideally, yes, you want them to stay within the pathway of where it's supposed to go, but then I could see that, you know what I mean? It's so because again, like you said, you're not in the studio and
Mhm.
trying to convey it with, like, the pressure that it was expected. But
Yeah.
Harry Potter, what was it that drew you into that world?
Oh, just the magic. I started reading them, funnily enough. I had gotten into a fight with my brother. I was around 7 at the time, and he had brought those books with us on vacation. And so my siblings went to the pool with my mom, and my dad stayed back at the hotel with me. And that was like my punishment. But again, circling back to what I said earlier, there were books in the hotel room. I did not feel very punished,
Yeah.
but the only book in the hotel room was The Philosopher's Stone. And I think by the time my siblings got back, I was like halfway through the book. And oh, I fell in love with the world. And I think what I really liked about Harry Potter at the time was that it was kind of overlaid into our own world. There's always like that kind of chance that when I turned 11, I could get my Hogwarts letter. I could become a wizard. I really, really loved that. And then Harry, as an 11-year-old, was so ridiculously sassy. So it was a very funny book to read. Yeah, I guess I've just always loved the sense of escapism and exploring new worlds and just the idea of magic.
Correct me if I'm wrong, because we've only covered like 2 or 3 books so far
Mm.
in that series so far. 4, I would say Game of Thrones, The Lord of the Rings, and, Harry Potter and Eragon. You said you like that world because it encompasses, like, our reality and the possibility of magic, whereas, like, obviously, Lord of the Rings, it's its own world. There isn't that yeah, you can relate to, like, relationship aspect of it, but here thank you. But you said, like, with not to magic, this curiosity for magic, where did that stem from? I'm trying to remember because I was 7 when I started reading them. I think that was probably my first exposure to fantasy, which was great 'cause again, it does kind of like the real world and then the magical world are, like, right next to each other. And I enjoyed that experience so much that I started seeking it out in books that I would read. The chicken probably came before the egg, that line, too. But it was just exposure to it at such a young age, and I had such an active imagination that it was really easy to kind of daydream about myself being able to do all these incredibly cool things. I grew up in a suburb, which was really great and like had neighborhood friends but the world felt very small because the suburb was on a big street. So you couldn't just like walk and go somewhere. Usually you're pretty encapsulated in that area. Suburb. Well, I was born in London, Ontario. Right off Commissioners. Anyone who's listening, from London, Ontario. But it felt very small, and I liked the way that I made the world feel really big. Yes. Even when you start a book or even a show, is there ever a point where you're just like, "This isn't for me," and then you stop? Or are you one of those people where you're like, "I'm just gonna give it a shot and see where it goes," and, like, start to finish? Do you know what I mean? Yeah, absolutely. I've probably become more discerning as I've gotten older and I've had less free time. Mm, but I find now it's basically one specific thing that I need in a piece of media in order to watch it all the way through. What does it make me happy at the end? Do I feel good at the end? Which means that it can be as silly as like an improv comedy show or like a 12 episode long season of The Traitors. Yeah. It just has to make me happy at the end. But there are some shows where I think sometimes it's melodramatic or the writing can sometimes be difficult to get through. Such as? Oh gosh. One of the ones I struggled with was Rings of Power, which was unfortunate for me. Same. 'Cause I really wanted to like it. I think the 3rd season, I didn't make it to the 3rd season. I tried really hard with the 1st season, and I was like, "I'm trying not to be a purist because I've seen enough of those fan base out there where they gatekeep the source material so biblically." When I watched Ring of Power, I was like, this is, like, really hard to get through." The potential was there, but the dialogue and everything just felt so clunky. Yeah. And I actually had given up on it, and it came up on my For You page, Mhm. and people were just raving at the 2nd season potential. I'm like, "Ugh, do I really wanna give it another shot?" I'm like, "Fine." I watched the 2nd season, 3rd season, I'm like, "Okay, they took people's feedback. It did a little bit better, but I kinda learned to accept it for what it was." Yeah. I know a lot of people like you where it's just like, I tried the 1st season, I can't go back. It was just so hard to kinda get through. Yeah, and I think I just have a lot of it, and it's probably not entirely fair to, like, each franchise that tries to something new, but I'm a little jaded from all of the
like sci-fi dystopian fantasy adaptations where they take something that has a set number of books and then they split the last book into two movies.
Oh god, that drives me crazy.
And it started like this frustration in me where it's just like this is very obviously an opportunity for you to make
Yeah, it is. It's money driven.
this didn't need to be more. Yes, and you just made it more and then you added stuff for it and then for some reason you took away stuff and you had twice as much time. And so I started to get frustrated with that. And then I think that carried over into some of like when I do like prequel series or like add-ons after like Star Wars, I think has been pretty hit or miss. Mm, Mostly hit.
Which ones did you like?
Well, okay. I'm a sucker for The Mandalorian.
I love The Mandalorian. I think it was like a first Disney successful adaptation. Anything after that, my attention span, not so much the show's potentiality, it was more that I just kind of got to a point with my life I couldn't commit to the lore.
Yeah, there was a lot because they did Andor and then the Book of Boba Fett, and then they did Ahsoka,
Yes.
and it's just like I know Star Wars isn't obviously it's like it's all in
The canon itself, yeah.
yeah like George Lucas all has it all in his brain. Just felt like at some point we let these characters rest a little bit, like that like Ahsoka was in so many episodes of the Clone Wars, like she's
Mm.
or Boba Fett. I'm not sure why he got
Or like a soul centerpiece.
yeah, like, that one I kinda tuned out until there was a Mandalorian cameo.
Going back to Star Wars with the one with Daisy Ridley. What was your thought on that? I really like the movies.
Yeah, I like that.
It was pairing females. I didn't think it was fair, the treatment that she got and even the cast got from the purists in terms of they just felt like it should have been made, or even like a female lead. The story should revolve around a female lead and all the multi-diverse casts. Like, what was your thought on that?
I did not know that. D I think I just went and saw the movie and really, really enjoyed it.
Well, one of the supporting cast, her name was something May Tran. She's Vietnamese. She was Finn's friend, right? And she said that the amount of vitriol she received was just so vile that she actually shut off her social media and quit acting altogether. And Daisy Ridley, again, the male chauvinistic response she had towards her, have this hostile reception from
Yeah.
her as you're like gatekeeper of like, no, Star Wars is from a male lens. It should continue that way.
I think if you take such a gendered view of media, you're going to miss out on a lot of really incredible creations.
Yes.
I think that eh, people create art to share it
Yes.
and to share their vision and create a community around, enjoyment of that art. And I think you're just really, really limiting yourself by saying, I can't like this
Yes.
because it's not from my point of view.
Yes.
Girl, I read books to find out different points of view.
It meets the person where they're at. I love that Paramount has introduced like all these new Star Trek series, like Discovery. I wasn't a big fan of Discovery, but I still watch it to its entirety. Strange New World, that's like one of my favorite. Starfleet, I haven't gotten in as much, but and even Picard,
Yeah.
that was definitely one of my favorite. Just bringing back the TNG cast. I asked like the one who was a Star Trek, and I said, "Did you watch any of them?" He's like, "No, I'm only TNG." I was just like, "But you're missing out on so much stories, like with the prequels and just how all that's how." He's like, "No, I'm good." I go, "Why?" He's like, I don't care for it." I was like, "How can you call yourself a Star Trek fan when you're just so," you know what I mean? I think I've kind of come to a point where multiple truths can be true, but you can be a really big fan base of that franchise and only like that specific series.
Yeah.
Right? You're not obligated to like everything that it encompass.
Yeah.
It's just like you said, like the gender.
I think it's just so disappointing. I think there are so many things in this world that we could be upset about right now. And hearing or experiencing a story through someone else's point of view, if that's what you choose to expend your energy being angry at, then I don't really know how I don't know how to relate to you. I don't know how to speak to you. That's it's the human experience is learning other people's perspectives. We don't live in a silo. You talk to people every day. And if your position is just that you don't want to experience something because you might learn something, then I hope you have a really fun time in your little box where no one ever bothers you or makes you change your mind. In your sci-fi fantasy world, was there ever a series where you were drawn to, you're just like, wow, like a female lead, I can totally see myself empowering that, embodying that, it's just so, like, inspiring. It was yeah. The one that comes immediately to mind is Lyra from His Dark Materials.
Okay.
So that was also made into a series recently. The movie was okay, but that was back in, like, Nicole Kidman in it, which is crazy, but, the newer series featuring Daphne, I don't remember her last name, but that was fabulous.
What was it about the character that you were drawn to that can see so much of yourself in it?
Lyra was around the same age as me when I started reading it. Immediately, I was just like, "I could be this person. I am a young girl of this age." But Lyra, immediately off the bat, some of her defining features are that she was very obstinate, very outspoken. She had a lot of opinions. She wasn't really scared of giving them.
Yeah.
And she didn't have any superpowers. She was just in a magical world, and she was put in a position where she could do the easy thing or she could do the right thing.
Right.
And a lot of the times those choices were difficult, but she still made them. And the books aged with her, which was amazing because I think she was around 11 or 12 when the book started. And then in the Amber Spyglass, which is the third one, she's about 13, 14, and she starts experiencing, like, a little bit of romance, and that was, like, really confusing for her, and she didn't really know what was happening, and I was around that same age too, and I was like, "Okay, this is extremely really cool."
Yeah, you're navigating that world, yeah.
But what I love stories where there are wizards and people doing incredible things and feats of magic, but there's also something really incredible about just a regular person in a magical world doing the absolute best they can, and I really, really loved Lyra.
These books, are they often recommended, or how do you come across it? How do you, because we said, like, Harry Potter was something you stumbled upon because it belonged to your brother, Tolkien was your dad, and, Game of Thrones, how's that even come about too?
Game of Thrones is recommended to me by my brother. I think like 6 months before the show came out, and, they had already announced it, and Dance of Dragons had just come out. My brother recommended them to me, and so I just went to Indigo and
Yeah.
the box set.
What about Aragon, though?
Aragon? Oh, this one I remember. We used to go on March break trips as a family, and there were no, like, iPads to give kids on planes in those days. My parents' number one thing was to bring a book, but I had forgotten to pack a book for the plane. We stopped at one of those airport stores that just always has a mini book section, and I just remember this royal blue book with this beautiful blue dragon on it with gold writing, and I was like, "That one. I'm gonna read that one."
Yeah.
And it was really new. It was hardcover. God bless my parents for paying airport prices for a hardcover book.
Like, wherever kids are, like, yeah.
I think so that was how I started reading Aragon,
Yeah.
and that one was like a 500-page book. That kept me occupied
Yeah.
for books to March break.
And Lyra.
Yes, the Golden Compass. Oh gosh. It's hard to remember because sometimes when my parents had chores to do, they would treat Chapters or Indigo a bit like a babysitter. Usually when I was a bit older, so, like, 10 to 11, I could be trusted not to, like, wander into the street.
Yes.
My mom would just say, "I have to go to Shoppers. I will be 20 minutes. The Indigo is right next door.
Yes.
Why don't you go look in the books and I will come find you.
Yeah.
And she didn't even say, like, go to this section. She knew I was going to be in the fantasy. The treat was when my mom was doing her chores and I had patiently waited.
Yeah.
I would be allowed to pick out one book.
But like you come from a literary family that just nurtures that, and that says a lot, right? And the fact that like it's across the board because I met one woman at the dog park and she was saying was another fellow token, and I said, "How did this happen?" She's like, "We're a literary family, but I have one daughter who's just the opposite of us, and I don't know how to navigate. She's into like trends and all these fashion." And I was like, me and my husband and my other daughter were just bookworm. I don't know how to navigate that. Where it sounds like across the board, like you and your sibling, you and your parents, like are consistently like bookworms.
Yeah, I think we all have different tastes in books. Like my dad reads like a lot of Robert Ludlum and Michael Crichton and like a lot of spy novels
Yeah.
and stuff like that. My mom, she will read almost anything, but first and foremost, she's an Austen fan.
Man.
We bought her like a collective Jane Austen's entire works in one book.
Oh god, she's a romance at her. Oh, yeah. That was my first exposure to the English world. My English teacher's like, I think you might like this. I didn't know who Jane Austen was. I'm dating myself. This is like back in cable day, whereas A&E, they were showcasing BBC's miniseries, the original Mercy. And I was like, who is this? I don't understand all this English babble, but I just love this world, right? I've always been drawn to old world, like 1920s and like 1930s, that kind of world, and then to be exposed to Regency. And then after that, you go from Jane Austen to Dickens, when I was like, oh my god, Dickens is so depressed. And like my vocabulary grasp was just very limited. All these old words, I was just like, this contextualize. Like, I think this is what he's implying here.
My younger sister, she and I have a pretty similar taste in books. Like we both fell into like the romantasy fad a couple years ago. I'll say Akatar.
Yes.
And then what I like about Akatar is it's a very easy read. You don't have to think that hard about Akatar if you just want to have it like a good fun time reading a book and at the end you're satisfied. And also all the books are out. Well, no, she just announced 2 more, but that's a different story.
So that's what I like romance for that reason because it's a consistent dopamine hit.
Yes.
Not so much predictability in terms of the narrative, but it's gonna result in a happy ending. I just went to like, okay, similar to Julia Quinn books, let's look up like historical romance. I read all the catalog of this author because I knew it was always gonna be a happy ending.
Yeah.
Whereas I don't want to think as much as I like drama and to experience all those range of emotion.
Yeah.
I need a consistent, like, yes, they're gonna have their conflict moment, but they're gonna resolve it.
And there's something so reassuring about it because when you watch something the whole way through and then right at the end, it's so like something bad happens. You just feel like, oh, I had just went up to the top of a roller coaster, and then there were no tracks, and now I'm just plummeting. There are some genres like romance where you just know that at the end you're gonna be happy, and it's like yeah, similar to my taste in television.
I was talking to one friend where he said that during COVID, he would play Voyager. That was his favorite series of the Star Trek. And he would have it on his background. He's like, it was very comforting. I said, yeah, because the stress of the world, the predictability of the show, because Star Trek resolves itself within the episodes. Even if it's a two-parter, it's going to be resolvable in a pleasant way, despite the crisis. All the comic interpretation in terms of Marvel cinema or DC cinema, going there. Do you watch any of those? And
Oh yeah,
do you agree with some people where they feel like it's Marvel fatigue because there's so much narrative, or do you take a different stand?
I definitely have a bit of fatigue.
Yeah.
Just because I think they had a very definitive plan for what they wanted to do up until Endgame.
Yes.
And then I think they probably just got a bit too much money and started making every show they could think of.
Yes.
And I just don't have the time to keep up with all of this media. And so when you make keeping up with your franchise feel like homework, then it stresses me out.
Yeah, the joy isn't there, like you said.
Yes, like I remember I watched Thunderbolts, the new Avengers. I went to see that movie, and one of the characters like the reject Captain America in that movie. That wouldn't have made any sense to me if I had not watched the series Falcon, series, which I had, like, only one, or 1 or 2 of those series, and that was one of them.
It's for the context. Yeah, someone who hadn't watched it, like, they wouldn't know.
They wouldn't know why it was significant for him to have been there, and I remember just thinking to myself, like, that was a 10-hour, I think, I can't remember, investment of my time
Yes.
that I spent and watched and paid attention. Does everyone who goes to see this movie have to have done the same? That feels like a really big obligation.
I think that's where I've heard people who watch the Marvel movies without understanding the lore or the overall arc of just the comic world. And their takeaway, they still enjoy it, but I think a lot of it is confusing because they don't quite understand its entirety. Whereas, like,
Yeah.
I only watch it, like, I watch some of it. My husband, he understands all the comics, will explain, like, the significant the character, whereas I can still appreciate it, like, the series, like, WandaVision, how that all ties in, like, I did really love I and this is what he kinda said too, the difference between the DC world and the Marvel world is each character had their own series or their own standalone movie. When they did come together as the Avenger, you are invested, whereas it was hard to invest in the DC world because unless you watched the cartoons or the comics growing up and knew the characters well in depth, it was hard to invest in the character because that organic connection didn't feel it didn't deliver it on screen like it did with Infinity War and Endgame.
Yeah. I really like how Marvel did it. I think Marvel just also consistently has had a much lighter tone.
Yes.
It was much easier to get kids into the Marvel movies. Just the brighter, flashier, there are more laughs. This is just a guess of mine, but I think one of the things that DC struggles with is tone or consistency. But also, there have been so many different iterations of their characters that I think fans of the franchise, just like some Star Trek fans, might not watch the new stuff. There may be Batman fans that really, really like the Christopher Nolan ones, but not so much more of like the classic George Clooney Batman
For within the current one.
or just Robert Pattinson, Edward, my beloved. What?
I liked him as the new Batman. I mean, it's good. His moodiness and even the interpretation, I really like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or even all the different Supermans, but all of those representations have had such different tones
Yeah.
that you're gonna have a really, really hard time satisfying everyone because everyone's gonna have Batman.
It is.
Well, some people, if they go into what are they called? The Justice League? Mm, they go into the Justice League expecting Dark Knight levels of grit and horror and uneasiness. They're gonna be really disappointed when it feels like a good time hangout gang trying to it was a oh yeah, let's go into that. You have such a broad horizon in your interpretation coming from, like you said, a suburban world where it felt so the world was so small, and then you go into escapism where you're exploring these vast world and different characters and imagination. And to keep that open-mindedness, you know what I mean, in terms of, like, adaptation, expectation, like, where does that come from? Is it something that was modeled to you and it's ingrained in you, or is it evolved with you as you've kind of gone through life? well, yeah, I think I probably always had like a little bit of a something in me that would like the idea of more worlds and magic and fantasy because I remember having always liked it. I don't remember like having my mind changed on it ever. I think that was just ingrained in me. My parents were always really supportive of reading. I think they really liked that I was reading fantasy because I think you can really easily buy fantasy books for specific age ranges. They never had to worry that I was getting into anything. That was great for them, and they're pretty big readers too. They were really happy that I was getting into that, except when I would read past my bedtime. They had to, like, come check on me, like, 5 times. They're "Turn your lamp on." All of those movies, like the episodes 1, 2, 3 of Star Wars, Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, like, and Hunger Games, like, those all started coming out as I was, preteen going into my teenage years, into my early adulthood, and I kind of continued that. It just kind of broadened my mind that way. when it was time to pick my major for my degree, I ended up choosing English literature, which it was a lot of essay writing, but it was a really good way of learning how to think about books that you've read.
In what sense?
Like, there's a joke that people can tell about English teachers. It's just sometimes the curtains are just blue.
Okay.
It's a story about how, like, a teacher is explaining the curtains in a story are blue because it represents the character's sadness. And then the author comes back and says, "No, I made the curtains blue because they were blue. They were just blue." Sometimes the story is the story and what's presented to you is right there. Or sometimes the author can have
Symbolism, right?
yeah, symbolism, further intentions. They wanna show you something or they wanna share something with you. Mm, but how you read a story and how you interpret something, that's something that you can own, and it doesn't have to be right.
Right.
It doesn't have to be nuanced or, like, incredibly well thought
Yeah.
but
It's like you said, it is what it is rather than over.
yeah, sometimes a story can be just a story to you, or sometimes it can be more than that, and you get to choose, and there's a lot of freedom in that.
Mhm.
Well, if I decide that I wanna like, for example, Wuthering Heights, if I wanna talk about how it's a criticism of class structure and racism and all of the major themes that I'm definitely forgetting right now. You could that was almost definitely the author's intention, but it's also something that I'm seeing in the story and so that I can think about. Or you can read The Very Hungry Caterpillar and the caterpillar is just hungry.
Well, that's what I mean. Like, it's kinda like in that moment where you're at, that's all you're taking in. I remember the villain, Saruman. Saruman, the author there who's saying how, like, he reads the book religiously all the time, but every time he comes back to it, there's a different interpretation and
Yeah.
takeaway, right? But it's the same thing, like, in that moment, it's literally just a wizard, but years later, you read it like, "No, this is where Tolkien was going with it in terms of his metaphor symbolism." Well, that, like, because of that foundation of a literary family, that has allowed you to continue connecting with your parents and or have you connected with others in the literary world, probably to your love of some of these fantasy book or even other genres.
Yeah, I think family is complicated.
Yes.
There are always things that you can agree or disagree with your family on, and it's, like, the easiest to do that with your family, but I think that's where the escapism of fantasy and, like, fiction books, I think that's it can be really powerful because even if you can barely talk to people on certain topics,
Yes.
you can still like, my brother recommended The Expanse to my mom because 'cause they're both, like, huge into sci-fi,
Yes.
and she read those books so quickly, and it's just a language that we all share
Yeah.
that is very uncomplicated.
Yeah.
It's just, "This is a world that I really like, and I would like to share it with you," and that is very simple and wholesome.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, in that way, it's helped. And then, especially over COVID, I think reading was because you can go out and share experiences with people,
Yeah.
but reading the same book is an experience that you can share. A few of my friends, we started a book club and we started just over Discord having like meetups and talking about the books and not in any sophisticated sort of ways.
That's like a an icebreaker.
Yeah, and just talking about what your experience was and how you felt about certain things, and then usually it would delve into nonsense and we'd all end giggling.
I love that because I think, yeah, that's just that desire to connect, that
Yeah,
in restriction, you found a humanistic way to connect over something that you have a shared experience. And that I think, like you said, from escapism, there's this, I can relate to you, even if we're different. Do you know what I mean? Like, I can look on our difference and still hold space for our difference, but I would like to connect you on a different level, you know?
yeah,
And still see your humanity side of it, right?
yeah. And that's why I think is so powerful, I think, of books is because it puts you in the view of someone else. And if someone else reads the same book that you have, you guys have shared that perspective. you've both experienced that together, and so it can almost, like, bring you together because maybe
In that regard too, like even with going back to your family. Holding space for similarity and difference is a really challenging skill. Yeah. And so it's one thing to read a book and have your different and some review to the author, but to people who, like you said, like your brother recommended this book and you see things differently, or even your friends, like how do you navigate that? When you feel differently, like their different opinion, how do you not let it bother you, or does it bother you at time, or you're like celebrating? Yes, you and I saw the same thing.
I think this is something I've gotten more perspective on as I've gotten older, because I think before, like, if someone had told me they didn't like Harry Potter, that probably would have upset me because I wouldn't have been able to understand how. But now I feel like people's time is almost like something they can give you because we have so little of it for like truly leisure activities. Well, if I recommend a book to someone and I've really, really liked it and they read it and maybe they didn't feel as great about it, mm, unfortunate that we can't gush about it together, but they still took the time to consider my recommendation, follow through with it, and it almost, like, means more if they didn't like it, and they still finished it. It's like, you value my opinion and also on the book, but then also my feelings on you finishing something that I liked, that means a lot to me, and so I think just having that perspective makes it a little easier if someone doesn't enjoy a piece of media the same way that I do.
Yeah.
It's just like, I appreciate that you took the time to try.
But do you think that's something that's uniquely you, or is that something that you kind of or model that?
I think it's probably come more from my friends, just the idea of doing something because it's important to someone else. Mm. Because my friends are all deeply empathetic people. I sometimes have a hard time reading social cues. So I wasn't always the best at that. Like if someone wanted to do something that I didn't want to do, I'd be like, no, I'm not going. I don't want to do that. But now it's like, this is important to you and you are important to me. So I will do this thing. It took a little bit of growth on my part. And
But that is a growth on your part because some people could have just resisted. Do you know what I mean? They value the friendship enough to kind of be like, I'm gonna try this on your behalf because you matter to me.
yeah, and then also knowing because I would want them to do the same for me. It became, how could I expect them to do that for something for me, which makes me feel so good if I won't do the same for them?
The reciprocal relationship.
And learning that about myself and like actually acknowledging it and then trying to change my behavior to reflect it, that took a long time.
And to have that kind of even be brought to light, like, listen, you regardless of how the conversation unravel, it hits home because you're being told about or I would receive it as an imperfection, right? For a flaw. And you can completely shut down and be like, yeah, look, we're not cool anymore, you know? Or you think it over, I'm like, look, this is really uncomfortable and I want to say I appreciate it, but I'm not quite there yet. But yeah, I hear you and let me work on it, right?
Yeah. I definitely value relationships where they can tell you a difficult thing.
Yes.
I'm always kind of couched in the language of, this isn't going to change how much I care about you, but it hurts me when, or it affects me when. I really appreciate that level of honesty.
Yes.
Because sometimes it's really helpful for me if it's spelled out in that way, because then it's presented to me in a way that I can do something about it. Whereas before it was like this miasmus issue where I couldn't kind of discern what the problem was. That kind of frankness in a relationship is really valuable to me.
That'd be fascinating. Okay, so let's wrap this up. It sounds like the curiosity still is there because you're so intrigued by so many different worlds that are out there, and whether it's being conveyed through adaptation on screen or even connecting with friends. Like, what is your hope and vision for just whether it's the literary world, sci-fi, from like a female lens, like how we consume this, like what are some of your highs and lows in on this journey of literary consumption, and where your hopes for it to go?
Mm. The highs, I think, definitely being major media picking up on the success of fantasy and actually investing in it. I think that happened, in my formative years. That was eye-opening for me. The lows, I think, this is gonna sound weird, but probably the Twilight books, because that was kind of my first experience with a franchise or piece of media where my liking it was a subject of ridicule. Okay, because it's like a young adult romance, like, haha, you like the vampire book kind of thing. This was when we were all in high school.
Oh, I'm sorry that happened to you.
Yeah, but I think it's an experience that lots of young female fans can relate to. For example, like Justin Bieber fans or One Direction fans, or even now like some K-pop fans. There seems to be a derision of the tastes of young female fans.
What do you mean? Like, say more about that.
It's kind of devalued, like almost.
You can't like fluff,
Yeah.
like lighthearted stuff.
For example, BTS right now is one of the most successful
Ooh.
boy bands in the world, and a large demographic of their fans are young women, and so it almost, what's the word I want? Like, devalues the contributions that BTS is making towards, like, music culture because it's directed at this demographic of fans. And I've seen that happen with, like, all sorts of young adult romance books.
But what exactly are they direct? Because you're saying that it devalues their music making. Like, what is your perception of where they're trying to convey, and why does having a younger audience impact in that regard?
That's a great question, and I wish that the people that felt that way could actually explain it, but it's almost like, okay, then I'll bring it into gaming. Like, it's, like, a very common experience when you're playing video games and someone will ask you what you play. Say, "Oh, I really enjoy Stardew Valley," which is a farming simulator game. And then that person, sometimes a man, will reply, "Oh, well, like, you're not a real gamer because you don't play, like, Call of Duty, or, like, you had a Switch, Martha, you be like XYZ games. These are the cornerstones of gaming. You can't be a real gamer." Like, it's somehow because it's not in it's like, in your perspective, like, a high quality game, it can't be worth much.
It's kind of like a rite of passage. Like, to get to be embraced in that world, you have to hit this benchmark in some ways.
Uh, I think if that happens to you, you're probably gaming in the wrong circle,
Yes.
because as far as I'm concerned, if you have Candy Crush on your phone, you're a gamer
Yes.
playing a video game.
But that comes back to that multiple truths can exist in the same space.
Yeah.
It's like this world where if you like Star Wars, therefore you cannot like Star Trek. Or if you like Star Wars,
Mhm.
you're not allowed to like these other aspects of
Yeah.
fantasies. You know what I mean? It's very stylistic, like you said, within the box.
Yeah.
But you and I are, from our conversation, we can like multiple facets,
Mhm.
or and still, like you said, chicks likes or likes what, right? It's
Yeah.
why can't you? You know, who's to say that no, if you are this, you therefore have to stay in that lane forever? That's
Yeah.
the narrow minded.
Yeah. Like, my taste is not worth less, but yet it's not your taste.
Yes.
And just because it's not a quality that you would demand from a piece of media, it doesn't mean that I can't find equal enjoyment from this piece of media, or great enjoyment from this piece.
From that low, where would you like your hopes or the vision for, whether it's gaming, whether it's just like the literary world, like
Just wish people would people would stop caring about gender so much.
yeah.
It is not a thing that I have ever particularly, like, having female representation in games is fabulous and I love it. But I'm not gonna not play a game if the main character is a man.
Right. I wonder also because we're on the receiving side as a female,
Mm.
and that we don't really value it as much, whereas in a man's world, like, they've never had to experience that.
Yeah, I think there's almost like a feeling of imposition.
Yes.
Whereas I feel like it's not that additional perspectives, be it women being non-binary, being any number of things, perspectives being forced on you. The scope is broadening.
Yes.
There are more games being produced now than there ever have. It's not like back in the early 2000s where you'd get maybe like 5 big titles a year. Now there's a new big title coming out every week. Incredibly high quality games. You can choose to play whatever you want. You can just read whatever you want. Nothing is being forced on you. And just why does it hurt you that someone else's story is being told?
Yeah.
Care about it because it's your hobby, but let it bother you less.
Yes.
It's not affecting you. If you don't like that a game has a female protagonist, I mean, that's unfortunate for you because a lot of games do. No, most games with female protagonists that I've played have been fabulous and I've really enjoyed it, regardless of the gender of the protagonist. I think you're missing out. I think you're really limiting yourself. But I think by having such a gendered view on media, you're you're just dragging yourself down. It's putting disdain and anger in a place where you really don't need it,
Yeah.
and it can really just,
Ruin the experience.
yeah. Uh, is there time for, like, a little bit of a tangent?
Yeah. Go for it.
I will recommend this series of books to everyone, although it is decently raunchy and it does have some difficult matter to get through, is Jacqueline Carey's series, Kushiel's Legacy.
Okay.
The first book is called Kushiel's Dart. It's written in kind of like a medieval fantasy France setting, set in like medieval Europe, but different. And the whole shtick of the country where the protagonist lives is that sex and love is just accepted. It's just everyone is very open about it. It can be an act of love or an act of worship, depending on what god you follow. And with the main, I guess, proverb from the head god or whatever is just love as you will.
Yes.
And that's the commandment is just love as makes you happy. And that's the overriding thing.
Yeah.
And just having I read it, I think when I was like 18, 19, and having that perspective that just everyone should have the opportunity to love who they want to, love what they want to, do what makes them happy, free of judgment and free of scorn. I think that really shaped the way that I look at media and look at the world around me.
Yeah.
Well, I would recommend that series to
I will consider that. Thank you. Thank you, Rachel, for your time. And thank you, Pippin, for your time also.
for a little minute. Until next time, stay curious, stay connected.